Evelyn always believed her life reflected the dream she had envisioned since her youth, a stable marriage, a cozy home, and little Harper as the living proof of her love for Braxton. However, this perfect image began to crumble when small signs of disinterest appeared in his behavior. Ignored messages, cancelled dinners, and distant looks over breakfast were more than just the stress of everyday life. Evelyn wanted to believe it was just work pressure, but deep down, something inside her screamed that something was wrong. One day, while tidying up the house, Evelyn found a restaurant receipt in Braxton's coat. It wasn't just any restaurant. It was an upscale place where they had celebrated their wedding anniversary the previous year. Her first reaction was confusion. Who did he take there, she wondered, trying to push away the most painful thoughts. But the discomfort grew like a knot in her chest. Determined to confront him, she waited until evening. When Braxton arrived, the scent of a perfume that wasn't Evelyn's betrayed him before she could even say anything. "Did you go somewhere today?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound calm. Without even trying to deny it, he replied, "I'm not happy here anymore, Evelyn. I think we need to talk." His words hit like a blow. Evelyn felt the ground beneath her vanish, but she tried to keep her composure, even as he confessed that he had been seeing a coworker named Mallory. "I didn't want it to happen like this, but I don't see another way. I need out of this marriage." The next day, Braxton packed his things and left, leaving Evelyn alone with Harper and a pile of bills. The emptiness in the house was suffocating. Harper, still too young to understand what was happening, kept asking why her father wasn't coming back. Evelyn cried at night, trying to hide her tears from her daughter while desperately searching for the strength to move on. The weight of betrayal and abandonment made each day feel endless, but Evelyn knew she couldn't give up. Harper needed her, and even though Braxton had chosen someone else, she would choose to fight. Without knowing how, she decided to start wherever she could, even if it was with small steps. With Braxton gone, Evelyn had no choice but to leave the spacious home where Harper had grown up. Without significant savings and with mounting bills, she found a small, modest apartment on the outskirts of the city. It was far from the ideal home she had envisioned, but it was all she could afford at that moment. The thin walls, creaky floors, and lack of furniture made the place feel cold, but Evelyn promised herself she would turn it into a fresh start. Harper, still too young to understand, frequently asked when her dad would come back. Each question felt like a dagger in Evelyn's heart, but she swallowed her tears and forced a smile as she answered, "He's traveling, sweetheart." Her biggest priority was shielding her daughter's innocence, still untouched by the harsh reality of abandonment. Figuring out how to pay the bills became a daily struggle. Evelyn, who had previously worked as an administrative assistant, realized she needed a job that fit her new reality as a single mother. After days of handing out resumes, she was hired at a small neighborhood cafe. The work was straightforward but exhausting, with long hours on her feet and a demanding boss. Still, the job became a mental distraction and a much-needed source of income to support Harper. In her apartment building, Evelyn met Beatrice, a neighbor in her 40s and also a single mother, living in the unit next door. Beatrice was talkative, optimistic, and full of practical advice for someone facing similar challenges. "The secret is not to despair, Evelyn. It might feel impossible now, but things get better with time. You just have to take one step at a time." Evelyn listened carefully, finding in Beatrice something she hadn't felt in months: emotional support. Despite the hard work and the loneliness she felt at night, Evelyn began to realize that every small step was a victory. Being able to pay rent at the end of the month, preparing a simple dinner for Harper, or even hearing her daughter's innocent laughter while she played were reminders that she was moving forward, even if slowly. But Evelyn's life was far from easy. One day, while returning home after a long shift at the cafe, she noticed her bank account was nearly empty due to an unexpected medical expense for Harper. The feeling of being trapped in an endless cycle of hardship brought her to tears in the kitchen, away from her daughter's eyes. Beatrice, hearing her sobs, knocked on the door and entered with a cup of tea. "You don't have to go through this alone," Beatrice said, holding Evelyn's hand firmly. The days at the small cafe were exhausting, but Evelyn clung to the routine as a way to keep her mind occupied. Between serving hurried customers and balancing the register, she began to notice a man who frequented the place almost daily. He always sat at the same table, a quiet corner by the window, seeming more interested in observing the world around him than engaging with it. His name was Callum, a reserved man with slightly disheveled brown hair and eyes that carried a haunting depth. Evelyn treated him with the same courtesy as every other customer, but their interaction never went beyond a polite, "Good morning," or "Your check, please." Callum, however, seemed to notice more than Evelyn realized. One particularly hectic morning, when she accidentally spilled a glass of juice on the counter, he got up to help her clean it. "I guess we all have days like this," he said, offering a faint smile. Surprised by his kindness, Evelyn quickly thanked him, unsure how to react. She wasn't used to receiving help, or even attention, since Braxton had left. That night, as she reflected on Callum's small gesture, she realized there was something different about him, something sincere. Over the weeks, Callum began to talk more. He would comment on the books he read while sipping his coffee or ask light-hearted questions about Evelyn's day. Gradually, what started as a simple, "Thanks for the tip," grew into brief but meaningful exchanges. "You work really hard, it's obvious," he said one day, noticing the tiredness in her hands. She smiled, unsure how to respond. There was a sincerity in his gaze that left her both unsettled and comforted. Callum didn't push for a connection. He seemed to understand Evelyn's boundaries and respected them without question. One day, while Harper waited for Evelyn to finish her shift, Callum approached her with a chocolate bar. "This is for you," he said, handing it to the little girl. Harper, usually shy around strangers, smiled and accepted it, eagerly telling him how chocolate was her favorite treat. The moment warmed Evelyn's heart. Seeing Harper smile, even briefly, was a relief amid the hardships they were facing. Callum simply smiled back, saying, "I like seeing kids happy. It's like a little light in anyone's day." Despite the budding connection, Evelyn was afraid. The scar Braxton had left made her hesitant. She didn't want to nurture hopes that might crumble again, especially for Harper's sake. But Callum seemed different. He wasn't intrusive or demanding. He was simply present. After weeks of slowly building a semblance of stability, Evelyn was caught off guard by an unexpected visitor. It was Braxton, standing at her apartment door with a casual smile, as if nothing had happened. Harper ran to him, thrilled to see her father after so long. Evelyn, however, stood frozen, her heart racing with a mix of anger and confusion. What did he want now? Braxton stepped inside without asking, glancing around the small apartment with a critical look. "Smaller than the old house, huh?" he remarked, his tone laced with subtle provocation. Evelyn closed the door and crossed her arms. "What are you doing here, Braxton?" He sighed, sinking onto the worn-out couch. "I came to see my daughter. I missed her." Evelyn wanted to believe him, but the casual and indifferent way he spoke those words only fueled her frustration. Harper, on the other hand, was beaming, clinging to her father and showing him the drawings she had made since he left. As Evelyn watched the interaction between father and daughter, she realized how uncomplicated Harper's view of the situation was. To her, it was as if Braxton had never left. But Evelyn knew better. He wasn't here to reconnect, there was something else behind his visit. When Harper left the room to fetch another drawing, Braxton finally revealed his intentions. "Mallory and I are moving to another state," he said bluntly. "I just wanted to let you know that I probably won't be able to visit Harper much. Life's complicated right now." His tone suggested he was trying to justify his choices, but Evelyn felt only anger. "You think you can just show up, drop this bomb, and leave again? Do you have any idea what this does to Harper? Evelyn shot back, her voice trembling with restrained fury. Braxton shrugged, as if oblivious to the weight of his actions. I know you're a great mom, Evelyn. She'll be fine with you. Those words were the breaking point. Evelyn realized there was no point in expecting responsibility or empathy from Braxton. He was completely detached from her reality and their daughter's needs. As he said goodbye to Harper, promising a future visit Evelyn knew would likely never happen, she made a decision: she would no longer depend on him. After Braxton left, Evelyn sat beside Harper, who was clutching the drawing she had made for her father. Will he come back soon? Harper asked, her eyes filled with hope. Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to find words that wouldn't shatter her daughter's innocence but also wouldn't deceive her. Daddy loves you, sweetheart. But for now, it's just you and me here. And I will always be with you. That night, as she tucked Harper into bed, Evelyn felt a mix of relief and sadness. While Braxton's return had caused brief chaos, it also brought clarity: she no longer needed him. Harper had her, and that would be enough. After Braxton's visit, Evelyn felt an even heavier weight on her shoulders. The lack of financial and emotional support from him forced her to focus entirely on Harper and her work. Yet, it also brought clarity: she would have to learn to trust herself. Slowly, Evelyn began to notice that others around her were offering something Braxton never had: genuine support. At the cafe, Callum continued to occupy his usual spot near the window. Evelyn observed that he was never in a rush, unlike the other customers, and seemed more interested in listening than talking. After weeks of casual exchanges, he asked, "Do you have anyone helping with your daughter?" The question caught Evelyn off guard. She wasn't used to opening up her personal life to strangers, but there was something different about Callum's tone. It wasn't intrusive, it was simply caring. Evelyn shared briefly that she was raising Harper on her own, without mentioning Braxton. Callum listened intently, and for the first time, Evelyn felt that someone truly understood the weight of her situation. He didn't offer unsolicited advice or empty reassurances. He just listened, something she hadn't realized she needed until that moment. One day, Callum came to the cafe near the end of Evelyn's shift, carrying a small children's book. He handed it to Harper, who was waiting for her mother to finish work. "I thought you might like this book," he said, offering the gift. Harper beamed, clutching the book like a treasure. Watching from a distance, Evelyn felt an unexpected warmth in her chest. It was such a simple gesture, yet it meant so much. As their interactions became more frequent, Callum invited Evelyn and Harper to a local park. Initially, Evelyn hesitated, worried about what people might think or the idea of creating expectations for Harper. But after some gentle insistence from Callum, she agreed. At the park, Harper ran around, laughing and playing, while Callum helped Evelyn relax, something she hadn't done in a long time. He brought her coffee, and they talked about simple things: music, movies, and what made Harper laugh. Evelyn realized she had forgotten how good it felt to have a light-hearted conversation. Despite the pleasant moments, Evelyn still had doubts. She knew Callum seemed genuine, but trusting someone again wouldn't come easily. Some days, she wondered if she was being selfish for allowing Harper to grow closer to Callum. And some nights, she felt guilty for experiencing a spark of happiness amidst the chaos of her life. However, one thing was undeniable: Callum was becoming a steady presence, not just for Evelyn but for Harper as well. Without promises or grand gestures, he showed he was there, willing to walk alongside them without rushing or pressuring her. The following weeks brought a sense of calm to Evelyn's life. Callum had become a steady presence, not only at the cafe but also outside of it. He never disrupted her routine but seemed to instinctively know when she needed help or a light-hearted conversation. Harper grew increasingly attached to him, and while this warmed Evelyn's heart, it also stirred an underlying fear that good things never seemed to last. One quiet afternoon, as Evelyn closed the cafe's register, Callum waited for her at his usual table. When Harper walked over holding the book he had given her, Callum smiled. "Did you finish it already?" he asked. Harper nodded excitedly and started recounting the story in detail. From a distance, Evelyn watched the scene, her heart filled with a mix of happiness and apprehension. The bond between Callum and Harper was growing, but that also meant she would have to confront her fears about the future. That evening, Callum invited Evelyn to dinner. He chose a small, cozy restaurant away from the bustling city center. Evelyn hesitated before accepting, not because she didn't want to go, but because she was afraid of where it might lead. Over dinner, they opened up about their lives. For the first time, Callum spoke about his late wife. The moment was heavy and quiet, but he shared his pain with a sincerity Evelyn had never seen in anyone before. "I thought I'd never connect with anyone again," he admitted, his gaze dropping. "But you and Harper, you've brought something into my life I didn't even know I needed." Callum's words touched Evelyn deeply, but they also scared her. She felt the weight of being someone important in his life, and the fear of failing or hurting Harper again made her pull back. A few days later, while Harper played at the park, Evelyn decided to talk to Callum. "You're too good for us," she began hesitantly. "I don't know if I can be what you need." Callum looked at her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Evelyn explained her worries, particularly about the impact of another potential heartbreak on Harper. "I don't want her to get attached to someone who might leave. It's happened before, and I can't let it happen again." Callum listened carefully, and after a moment, he replied with calm patience, "Evelyn, I'm not here out of obligation. I'm here because I want to be. And I'm not going anywhere unless you ask me to." Their conversation brought Evelyn momentary relief, but it also planted a seed of doubt. Was it fair to let Callum become part of their lives when she still carried so much fear? Yet, deep down, she wanted to believe that maybe, this time, things could be different. The stability Evelyn had been building was suddenly threatened by an unexpected problem. The cafe where she worked, her primary source of income, announced it would close in 2 months. The news hit like a bombshell. The cafe's owner, a reserved man named Mr. Finley, explained that financial difficulties had made it impossible to keep the business running. Evelyn tried to stay calm, but as she returned home, panic began to set in. Without the job, she wouldn't be able to pay rent, cover the bills, or provide for Harper's needs. Sitting in the kitchen, she buried her head in her hands, desperately trying to think of a solution. Beatrice, her intuitive neighbor and confidant, noticed something was wrong. "You look worried." "What happened?" she asked. Evelyn confided in her, and Beatrice, always practical, replied, "You have skills. Why not try doing something on your own?" At first, the idea seemed absurd. Evelyn had never thought of herself as an entrepreneur. But as she reflected, she recalled something Callum had said a few weeks earlier, "You have a special way with people. That's rare." Those words echoed in her mind, and for the first time, she considered the possibility of starting something small, something of her own. That night, after Harper had gone to bed, Evelyn shared her situation with Callum. He listened carefully, then said, "If you have an idea, I want to help. Not just with money, but with planning. I believe in you." Evelyn hesitated. Accepting help felt like a huge step. Still, Callum's offer didn't feel patronizing. He wanted to be a partner, not a savior. The next day, Evelyn began researching ideas. Drawing from her experience, she envisioned a small cafe with a reading corner, a space where mothers could bring their children while enjoying a quiet coffee. The idea seemed practical, but fear lingered. Was it too risky? As she planned, Evelyn noticed a significant shift. For the first time in years, she was thinking about her future with hope rather than just surviving. Harper noticed the change too. "You're smiling more, Mommy," the little girl said, her innocent eyes shining. Evelyn realized her determination wasn't just for herself, it was also to set an example of strength for Harper. True to his word, Callum helped Evelyn build a plan. He contributed practical suggestions, like ways to attract customers and minimize initial costs. Most importantly, he never made decisions for her, making it clear that she was in control. Despite the challenges and uncertainties ahead, Evelyn felt that something was changing. Life was still complicated, but for the first time, she wasn't facing everything alone. There were people who believed in her, and little by little, she was starting to believe in herself too. After weeks of planning and research, Evelyn found herself facing a critical decision, whether or not to open the cafe she had dreamed of. The idea of creating a welcoming space where mothers and children could feel at ease seemed promising. But fear still consumed her. She lacked experience in running a business, and any mistake could jeopardize her and Harper's future. Callum noticed her hesitation. During a quiet conversation at the park, he encouraged her. "No one's saying this will be easy, Evelyn. But you've already overcome so much. This is no different. Besides, you're not alone." Those words resonated deeply. Evelyn began to realize that perhaps her fear was more about trusting herself than about the cafe. Even so, there was still one practical hurdle: money. Starting even a small business would require resources she simply didn't have. Callum, always thoughtful, made a suggestion that caught her off guard. "What if I invest? Not as a gift, but as a silent partner. You can pay me back once the cafe starts thriving." Evelyn was stunned. The offer seemed too generous, almost too good to be true. "Callum, I don't know. I don't want you to feel like you have to do this for us," she replied, trying to mask the whirlwind of emotions she felt. Callum, in his usual calm manner, said, "I'm not doing this out of obligation, Evelyn. I'm doing it because I believe in you and the potential of this business." Even so, Evelyn hesitated. She discussed the idea with Beatrice, who, as always, was straightforward. "Evelyn, sometimes we need to accept help. It doesn't mean you're weak or dependent on someone. It means you're seizing an opportunity to grow." After days of consideration, Evelyn decided to accept Callum's offer. They began working together to turn her dream into reality. They found a small space in the neighborhood, simple but full of potential. Evelyn spent nights reviewing plans, testing recipes for the menu, and designing a space that was both functional and inviting. Harper, not fully understanding what was happening, loved visiting the empty space. "It's like a new house," she said, laughing as she ran around. Evelyn felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. For the first time, she was building something that was entirely hers. Despite the progress, Evelyn knew success wasn't guaranteed. The fear of failure lingered, but she chose to face it. Callum remained by her side, offering support when needed but always letting her take the lead. He understood that more than opening a cafe, Evelyn needed to prove to herself that she could do it. The cafe was named The Reading Nook, a name chosen by Harper, and its grand opening was set for the following month. Evelyn didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long time, she had something she didn't realize she had lost: hope. The opening day of the Reading Nook had finally arrived. Evelyn had spent weeks working tirelessly, ensuring every detail of the cafe reflected her vision. Shelves were filled with colorful books, carefully arranged to attract children. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the soft sound of instrumental music playing in the background. The tables, adorned with small vases of flowers, added a welcoming touch to the space. Harper, full of excitement, ran around the cafe, showing off every corner as if it were her own home. "Look at this book, Mommy. Can I read it with my friends?" Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling with emotion at seeing her daughter so happy. This moment was more than just a professional milestone, it was the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. The first customers began to arrive. Evelyn felt a flutter of nerves as she welcomed them, but pride soon replaced her anxiety as she saw the tables filling up and children exploring the books. Beatrice was among the first to walk in, bringing a symbolic gift, a plant to decorate the counter. "For good luck," she said with a warm smile. Callum arrived shortly after, carrying a cake to celebrate the occasion. "I couldn't let this day go by without something special," he said, placing the cake on one of the tables. Harper ran to hug him while Evelyn looked at him with gratitude. Callum wasn't just someone who believed in her, he had become an essential part of this new phase. However, not everything went perfectly. In the afternoon, one of the coffee machines broke down, forcing Evelyn to improvise and take orders manually. Despite the setback, the customers were understanding, and Callum quickly stepped in to help with simpler tasks. Evelyn realized that even during challenging moments, she now had a support system she never thought she'd have. At the end of the day, as she closed the register, Evelyn felt a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. The cafe hadn't just been a success in terms of customers, it had become a space where she felt she could finally breathe again. Harper was fast asleep in one of the chairs, and Callum stayed behind to help tidy up. "You did it, Evelyn," he said with a genuine smile. She looked around at the space she had worked so hard to create and realized he was right. For the first time, she felt capable of building something solid and lasting. Even with the challenges that might lie ahead, this was the start of something worth fighting for. With the success of the grand opening, Evelyn began to feel that the reading nook was finally finding its footing. The days were busy but fulfilling. Harper loved spending her afternoons at the cafe, interacting with other children while Evelyn worked. Callum remained a steady presence, offering help when needed but always respecting her independence. One afternoon, as Evelyn was organizing the bookshelves, a new customer walked into the cafe. He stood out from the regular crowd, dressed in an elegant suit and exuding confidence. He introduced himself as Theo Vaughn, a local entrepreneur. "I've heard great things about this place and wanted to see it for myself," he said, looking around with genuine interest. Evelyn, ever polite, thanked him for the kind words and served him personally. During their conversation, Theo revealed that he owned several local businesses and admired the uniqueness of the cafe. "A place like this has so much potential," he remarked. While Evelyn was proud of her cafe, she wasn't sure where this conversation was headed. The next day, Theo returned, this time with a proposal. He suggested a partnership to expand the reading nook to other neighborhoods. "We could bring this concept to places where mothers and children really need something like this," he said. Evelyn was stunned. The idea of expanding was exciting but also overwhelming. She had just begun her journey and was already being asked to take a much bigger leap. That evening, Evelyn shared the news with Callum and Beatrice. Callum, always thoughtful, encouraged her to think carefully. "It's a great opportunity, but make sure you're in control. Don't let him turn this into something you don't recognize." Beatrice, on the other hand, was thrilled. "You're being recognized for what you created. This is huge, Evelyn." In the days that followed, Evelyn met with Theo several times to discuss the proposal. He seemed genuine, but Evelyn couldn't shake her own insecurities. Was she ready for such a big challenge? At the same time, she knew the cafe had become something special, something that could grow and help more people. Harper, sensing her mother's hesitation, gave her own innocent but heartfelt opinion. "Mommy, you always tell me to try new things. Maybe this is a new thing for you too." Harper's words echoed in Evelyn's mind, bringing an unexpected sense of clarity. Finally, Evelyn decided to accept the partnership, but with clear conditions. She would maintain full creative and administrative control of the reading nook. Theo agreed, praising her determination. "You have vision, Evelyn. That's rare. Let's create something amazing together." With the new partnership in place, Evelyn realized that the cafe wasn't just a business, it was a symbol of her strength and how far she had come. Now, she was ready to take another step forward, trusting herself more than ever before. With the partnership with Theo established, Evelyn dove into planning for the Reading Nook's expansion. Meetings became frequent, and Evelyn discovered that Theo was detail-oriented and visionary but also persistent. He had ideas that often clashed with the cafe's original concept, such as making the space more commercial and less welcoming. One afternoon, while reviewing plans for the new location, Theo suggested reducing the area dedicated to children's books to make room for more tables. More tables mean more customers, and more customers mean more profit, he argued. Feeling uneasy, Evelyn calmly responded, "The purpose of the Reading Nook isn't just profit. It's to create a space where children and their families feel at home." Tension between them was slowly building, but Evelyn knew she needed to maintain control. Callum, noticing her unease, asked how things were going with Theo. As Evelyn vented, she admitted feeling pressured by some of Theo's decisions. "I want the cafe to grow, but not at the cost of what makes it special," she said. Callum, ever practical, advised her, "Stand your ground, Evelyn. This project is yours, and it will only succeed if it reflects who you are." The situation came to a head when Theo, without consulting Evelyn, hired an architect to redesign the layout of the new cafe. When Evelyn saw the sketches, she realized the space bore little resemblance to her original vision. The books were relegated to a small corner, and the atmosphere felt more like a restaurant than a haven for mothers and children. Feeling betrayed, Evelyn confronted Theo. "You made this decision without even consulting me," she said firmly. Theo, visibly frustrated, replied, "I'm the investor, Evelyn. I'm thinking about the business's future. You should trust my experience." Evelyn took a deep breath, maintaining her composure. "I respect your experience, Theo, but this business was built on an idea that connects people. It's not just about profit, it's about purpose. And if we don't stick to that, the Reading Nook loses what makes it unique." After a lengthy discussion, Theo finally relented. He acknowledged that he had overstepped by making decisions on his own and committed to respecting Evelyn's vision. However, the experience left its mark. Evelyn realized she would need to be even more assertive in the future to ensure her ideas weren't overshadowed by Theo's pragmatism. That evening, as she watched Harper playing in the cafe, Evelyn felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. Once again, she had defended what she believed in, but she knew the challenges wouldn't end there. Callum arrived shortly after, bringing her a cup of coffee. "It was a tough day, but you did what needed to be done," he said proudly. Evelyn smiled, knowing that, despite the difficulties, she was building something that reflected her true self. And that, for her, was what mattered most. After the intense conflict with Theo, Evelyn began reflecting on how much she had changed since opening the Reading Nook. Once consumed by self-doubt and fear of failure, she now realized she possessed a strength she had never imagined. Even so, the weight of her responsibilities and the constant challenges of her partnership with Theo left her feeling drained. One day, while reviewing the cafe's financial records, Evelyn noticed that the new locations were starting to generate consistent profits. It was a significant milestone, but it also served as a reminder of how much her life had transformed. Callum, ever observant, noticed her pensive expression. "You're achieving all of this, Evelyn. But you're forgetting to give yourself credit," he said. Those words stayed with her. Evelyn realized that despite the cafe's growth, she still carried a lingering sense of inadequacy, as if her success was temporary or simply due to luck. However, every obstacle she had faced, from raising Harper alone to standing her ground with Theo, was proof of her capabilities. Later that week, Theo proposed a meeting with potential investors interested in expanding the business further. "If we close this deal, we could open franchises in other cities," he said. Clearly excited. Evelyn, however, hesitated. Expanding to such a scale might mean losing creative control and distancing the cafe from its original purpose. She discussed the proposal with Callum and Beatrice. Callum reminded her, "What you've built is special because it reflects who you are. Make sure that as it grows, it doesn't lose that essence." Beatrice, ever blunt, added, "Evelyn, you've already proven you can do this. The decision is yours. Trust yourself." Evelyn knew she needed to make a choice that aligned with her values. At the investor meeting, as Theo presented ambitious plans, Evelyn calmly interrupted. "I appreciate your interest, but my focus isn't on creating a chain of franchises. The Reading Nook was designed to connect people, and I want to ensure that remains at the heart of everything we do." The room fell silent for a moment, but the investors respected her decision. Theo, though visibly disappointed, acknowledged her resolve. "You have a clear vision, Evelyn. That's admirable." It was a validating moment for Evelyn, who finally felt in full control of her future. That night, as she tucked Harper into bed, they shared a quiet conversation. "You're so strong, Mommy," Harper said, unaware of how deeply her words resonated. Evelyn smiled, holding her daughter's hand. "I'm strong because I have you," she replied. Evelyn realized then that the cafe's success was just one part of her journey. The most important achievement was that, with every decision, she was building a life rooted in her values, her strength, and her unconditional love for Harper. And at last, she truly recognized her own worth. With the success of the Reading Nook firmly established and tough decisions behind her, Evelyn began to notice another shift in her life, this time, in her heart. Callum, who had stood by her through every challenge, had become more than just a friend or supportive partner. He was the person who made Evelyn believe that the future could still hold beauty, despite everything she had endured. One afternoon, as they closed the cafe together, Callum invited her for a walk. Harper was staying at Beatrice's house, so Evelyn decided to accept. They strolled through the neighborhood park, talking about everything and nothing. Callum, ever observant, noticed that Evelyn seemed more at peace than ever. "You've changed so much since I first met you," he said. "It's inspiring to see how much you've grown." Evelyn smiled but hesitated before responding. "I had to grow," she said, looking at the trees around them. "But you've been here the whole time. I don't know if I could have done it without you." Callum stopped walking and turned to face her. "Evelyn, you would have done it. Maybe it would have taken longer, but you have a strength that few people have. I just had the privilege of walking beside you." Callum's words stirred something in Evelyn that she hadn't felt in a long time: security. He wasn't just a practical support, he was someone who saw the best in her, even when she couldn't see it herself. After a moment of silence, Callum took her hand. "I don't want to push you, but I think you know how I feel," he said honestly. Evelyn felt her heart race, but this time it wasn't fear, it was something different, something good. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked at Callum and realized that, perhaps for the first time, she was ready for something new. "I feel something for you too," she admitted. "But I need time. I need to be sure I'm not leaning on you because of what I've been through." Callum nodded, his expression as patient as always. "I'll wait as long as you need, Evelyn. What matters is that you're happy." In the days that followed, Evelyn allowed herself to feel. Her conversations with Callum grew deeper, their small moments together held more meaning, and Harper, as always, loved having Callum around. "He makes you smile more, Mommy," Harper said, unaware of the depth of what was happening. Evelyn realized Harper was right. Callum brought a lightness she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't about relying on him or filling a void, but about building something new on a solid foundation. For the first time, she didn't see love as something to fear but as something that could bloom in its own time. Months after that walk in the park, Evelyn's life felt more stable than ever. The Reading Nook was thriving, with loyal customers and a space that had become a neighborhood favorite. Harper, happier than ever, spent her days surrounded by books and children, her joy reflecting the peace Evelyn was finally starting to feel. Callum remained by Evelyn's side, respecting her time and space but making it clear he was there, ready to build something more if she wanted. And she did. Not because she needed him, but because she had found something rare in Callum, a genuine love built on patience, respect, and partnership. One day, while tidying up the cafe with Callum, Evelyn was surprised by Harper, who appeared holding a drawing. On the paper, she had drawn the three of them together, surrounded by hearts. "We're a family now, right, Mommy?" Harper asked with the innocent certainty only a child could have. Evelyn looked at the drawing, then at Callum, who smiled warmly. That night, after putting Harper to bed, Evelyn made a decision. She asked Callum to stay and talk. "I've taken my time to accept this, but now I know I'm ready," she said, her heart racing. "I want to try. I want to build something with you." Callum took her hand and, with his steady gaze, replied, "I waited because I knew it was worth it. And I'll keep being here, by your side." From that moment on, Evelyn and Callum began building a deeper relationship. It wasn't perfect, there were differences and challenges, but both were willing to face them together. Harper, always at the center of their lives, seemed more complete, as if she had found what she had been missing. The cafe continued to grow, and Evelyn decided to open another location, this time with a larger team so she could balance work with time for Harper and Callum. She finally understood that she didn't have to do everything alone. By delegating responsibilities, she found time to enjoy the life she was creating. On a sunny day, Callum took Evelyn and Harper for a picnic at the park where it all began. Amid laughter and stories, he pulled out a small ring he had hidden in his pocket. "Evelyn, you brought light into my life when I least expected it. I want to spend the rest of my days with you. Will you marry me?" Evelyn was silent for a moment, overwhelmed with emotion. She looked at Harper, who was shouting excitedly, "Say yes, Mommy," and then at Callum. "Yes," she replied, tears in her eyes. It wasn't just an answer to him, it was an answer to herself, a way of finally embracing love, happiness, and the future she deserved. Evelyn's life was no longer a constant struggle. It was now a balance of challenges and joys, built with effort, love, and the strength she had discovered within herself. The past no longer defined her, it had only shaped her into the strong and courageous woman she had become. And with Callum and Harper by her side, she knew the future was bright. Thank you for watching my video. Subscribe to my channel, you will help me a lot. A hug.